Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, and welcome to Pangolin, the conservation podcast. The show dedicated to exploring and amplifying the world's underappreciated conservation stories. The stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. I'm your host, Jack Baker, and it is so good to have you back with me once again, where this series we are celebrating all things Africa. Last time we talked about rhinos and shoebills with the amazing Cam Whitnall, we've had Charles Imogo talk about pangolins, and this time we have the absolutely brilliant Rex Molapo, who is here to talk about something actually very, very different. We're not animal species specific today, we're doing something a bit out of our comfort zone, because she is here today to talk all about the project which she helped co-found, Conservation Music Lesotho. This amazing organisation seeks to inspire environmental action through the power of music. So we chat all about what that means, how they do it, and the impact they have seen so far. And it's so interesting as someone who is not musically talented in any way. I was so fascinated and I loved it, and I am so glad you get to hear it as well. We also chat about Rex's favourite underappreciated African species, which is the Ibis. So we share some fun facts about that, some stories about that, and she does an absolutely top-notch Ibis impression, which I had never heard an Ibis impression before, so this could be a groundbreaking first for you as well, listeners, because it's absolutely fabulous. And now that I've built this episode up so much, I should go and just let it play. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and let's get started. And welcome back to the show. I am now joined by Rex Molapo, the co-founder and director of Conservation Music Lesotho. Her organisation uses the power of music to inspire environmental action and has so far reached over 8,000 people. So really fantastic, really interesting concept, something we've not talked about on the podcast at all before, music. So I'm really excited to kind of chat about it today. Thank you so much for joining me, Rex.
Hi, Jack. Thanks for having me.
It's my absolute pleasure. For listeners, so they know, we have a little bit of history, I suppose. We met while I was in Tucson last year. You were also at the same conference as me. So we met there and kind of both part of that 30 under 30 environmental education group for last year. So yeah, we have a little bit of history. And when I met you, I knew I wanted to talk to you on the show because your project sounded so interesting. So I'm so excited you're finally here to chat about it.
Great. I'm also happy. Yes, I'm happy that we get this chance to speak about this. So yeah.
Yes, perfect. Well, I kind of gave you a little bit of an introduction there, but my first question for everybody is I always let them introduce themselves because I do my research and I find out things about you, but I always feel the best people to introduce themselves are the person. So do you want to introduce yourself to the listener? Tell them a little bit about who you are, a little bit about your background, what should they know about you?
Okay, so my name is Reekelitsoe Molapo, also known as Rex. Nickname. I'm from Lesotho, like the tiny country inside South Africa. I feel like I always have to do this because most times people don't really know where Lesotho is. So yes, we're that small country that's totally landlocked by another country like South Africa. Mm-hmm. And I'm an environmental activist and social entrepreneur. I've been working in this particular space for the past 5 years through my nonprofit organization called Conservation Music Lesotho. And yes, like I said, I'm also a social entrepreneur. So I have a small green startup on the side that's basically focused on creating or providing or supplying alternatives to plastics. And then we also want to go into biofuels and later on renewable energy. So those are the things that I'm doing. But for all the things that I am busy with, they're kind of all centered around the environment, sustainable development, and like the green economy. So that is basically it about me. Yes.
I like how you say that's basically it. Not like there's so much stuff. That's there's so much. Like I feel like I haven't even written questions about the renewables stuff. I'm gonna have to, but later on, maybe if we have time, I might sneak a question or two in because that sounds so interesting as well. And like it seems to be a common theme that's emerging is like I've talked to a couple people from the kind of 30 under 30 group that we were a part of, and it seems to be the theme is nobody seems to have time to sleep. They seem to do everything all the time. They seem to do so many projects. I'm so impressed. Like I'm like, oh, I need to be doing more somehow. This is it's amazing. But no, that's no, it's the perfect little introduction, I think, because yeah, it's really outlined so many things that I want to ask you about. The first of which, I guess, is kind of conservation music, your organization. Like, I think it's such an interesting concept and it's such a like different project from everything, as I said in the introduction, like we've talked about on the podcast before. So I wondered, could you tell us a little bit about what does that organization do? Like, what is it and what does it do?
So Conservation Music Lesotho is an organization. It's an environmental nonprofit that leverages the power of music for environmental education. And our mission is basically to confront environmental collapse through the power of music in the developing world. At the moment, yes, we're still based in Lesotho, but through our global organization, we've also tapped into other Southern African countries because the long-term plan is to expand and scale our impact to other surrounding countries and even go global with our initiative. And what we basically do is we have different kinds of programs. We have eco concerts, what we call eco concerts. We have classroom resources, which is a program that has to do with schools, where we go out into different schools, but specifically focusing on rural areas and peri-urban areas in the country where most people are really much still very much dependent on the environment for their livelihoods and to do their daily activities really. And then we also have live musical workshops that we host, and we work with artists obviously because then we're very much centered around music. So those are the things that we basically do, and those are the programs that we have under Conservation Music Lesotho at the moment. So yeah,
that's really interesting. And I wondered, like, so when you're running like activities and you're kind of doing all those things and working with artists, is the music that you're kind of bringing to people and the music maybe that you're teaching people and things, is it kind of like based on the sounds of nature? Are the lyrics maybe about nature? Like, how do you kind of combine those two? Like, as someone with no musical skills, that's so interesting to me. So, like, how do you combine those two things to make it like a conservation music program rather than just a music program?
So the way we do it, we sometimes do incorporate like natural sounds, but that's not really like the big focus. The big focus is really on the lyrical content, how we make it. It's supposed to be environmentally focused. So the whole point of all of this is to basically educate people about different issues, especially around environmental issues that are locally based and place-based in a sense. And the way we do it, we would, like, I'll give you an example. For instance, how we do it. We would host maybe like a musical workshop we have what we call a music toolkit that has different types of environmental issues that we feel are very much relevant to our home country. And then we would invite artists for a session, basically, where they're going to be learning a lot about these different environmental topics that are important. And then we come up with lyrical content that's educational around all those environmental issues. So that's how we've pretty much done it in the past, and that's the concept that we've basically proven that it works. So that's how we do it. Yes. And then a song was then produced, and the songs that then we've recorded and produced, then we go on to use for our classroom resources program as music videos that the students learn about different environmental topics about, but in a musical way. So yeah.
That's so fascinating. And it's such a good concept, because I guess, like, yeah, the music and lyrics and things like the environment, they are kind of for everybody. Both of those concepts should be for everybody. They can be enjoyed by everybody. And so bringing them together in that way and kind of like, yeah, having people come up with things creates really transferable, interesting resources and stories. And it's so fascinating. Like it sounds so amazing. And like, yeah, so fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating, because I guess also the reason for music really is the fact that it's a powerful educational tool, which is what we. And then also the fact that it's such a universal language, and it's very inclusive. So the types of people that we work with are from all types of backgrounds, and you would deal with people who are headmen out in the fields, or farmers, or illiterate people who cannot necessarily participate in conventional workshops, for instance, about these types of topics. And the music kind of breaks down that barrier, and it makes everybody to be part of the conversation, and it's also inspirational. And the fact that it has the power to appeal to people's values and emotions. So that was the whole point of really going the music and trying to incorporate creativity in what we do, because we believe that music is powerful, and there's also scientific research that has shown the power of music and the staying power that it has in people's minds. So those are some of the reasons why we decided to go the route of music. And like you said, there's stories being told, so there's an element of storytelling in this process, which is very important to highlight, that it's not just, oh, clean up, do whatever, and like in a very basic way, but it's done in an interesting way that has a storytelling element in it, and that appeals to people's values, emotions. And also the other important thing to mention is that we use local languages and local genres that are relatable to the people and the communities that we're working with. So there's that point of connection with what we're trying to do. So and our target audience. So yes.
That's fast. Do you find like then like people bring their own stories? Because obviously, I guess in environmental issues, sometimes people feel kind of left out of the discussion in a way. And so do you find that when you're having these kind of sessions, people bring their own stories in and they kind of incorporate their own experiences in? Or do you think like, do you have to kind of provide them with the kind of knowledge and the kind of like themes, or do they have them kind of like already inside them? Like...
So because it's such a collaborative and process, and we co-create with the artists, the people we work with, they bring their stories. So it's not necessarily like a top-down approach where you're like, oh, teaching people. I always try and move away from the word teach. I always feel like there's already indigenous knowledge existing in the communities that we go into. There's some level of knowledge about environmental issues in the communities that we go into. People are already aware of some of the conservation issues in their area. However, you would still identify certain gaps here and there, which is where then we kind of fill those gaps with the right information, with maybe researched and accurate information and knowledge. So, but people bring their stories really, because once you tell them what it is that we're going to be talking about, and then looking at the different types of topics and them kind of understanding what the topics where we're going to be discussing are, or we're going to try and create a musical piece with, then they have stories they can reference. They're like, somebody in my community did this, or whoever did whatever, and then we start like creating a song from such. So it is so much of a collaborative process. It's not just like, oh, we're going into this community where people know nothing, absolutely nothing, and we're going to teach them. It's not necessarily that, but it's more about co-creation and seeing what people already know. Because the other thing I didn't mention is that we also do pre-surveys before we come up with a musical piece. And how we do it is such that these pre-surveys, they would help us to give us some form of like basic information or like data about what is the existing knowledge in this particular community about these types of topics. And then after that, then we decide, okay, we collect the data, we analyze the data, and then we identify the gaps. So like, okay, these are the gaps that we're identifying. And then how do we plug them? And then that's when then we collaborate with artists and we create this mashup of some sort. Yeah. So that's the way we do it.
I want to come and watch one of these works. Like, I feel like that would be so fascinating to kind of watch this process. Like, I mean, as I said, I have zero musical skill. I sing in the shower, or like I sing when I'm doing like housework and stuff, but like nothing beyond that. So like, it would be so fascinating to see people who like genuinely like actually, do the people who come, like, are they musicians beforehand, or is it more of like okay, we're gonna, like, here's some instrument, like here we're gonna work together on having to kind of get the instruments together and stuff? Is that like part of the process as well?
Yeah, but most of the people we work with, like I said, it's artists,
Yeah.
so already musicians. I'm a singer myself, and I've like co-created some of the songs that we have created. And because we're a group of, what will I call us? Creatives. I don't know. I always kind of run away from that. But I always see myself, I'm like, I'm not a creative. But I am a singer, and I had been doing it for many years beforehand, which is going to then come. I'll share more about this when we talk about how did this come about and all of that, because then there's that history about me. But this is basically like a collective of people who are like artists, creatives, who come together for this one big important mission. And that's how we're contributing. So the people we work with are musicians who in their own right are already like flourishing in that area. And then even the other artists that we've worked with. In some cases, we've worked with visual artists and trying then to create this collective of artistic expression. But obviously our focus is mainly music. So the people we work with are musicians, yes. And they're already talented.
I can, yeah.
Yeah, and they play. Some of them play instruments, but of course, when we go in some communities, some of them are not necessarily do not necessarily have a musical background, but they're able to kind of like contribute to the process in one way or another and help make it amazing. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine it must be like, yeah, whenever you get creative people into a room, it like the ideas must just run in 100 different directions and like kind of have like all of this excitement, and like it's so exciting, like so interesting. I guess you kind of like led us naturally on then to the next kind of questions which I had were like, we've talked about the idea and how it works kind of now, but it is such a unique idea. I wanted to ask you about kind of your background and kind of like where the idea came from originally, because yeah, it's such an interesting kind of one to me. And I guess that's like a good first question is like, where did that idea come from in the first place?
Okay, so the idea came from a friend of mine and colleague, Alex. He's from the US, and so I met them years ago when they had like an event here in the country where they, at the very early stages of this particular movement and still trying to really shape it. And I met them. In my background, like I said, in the past, I was singing. I'd been singing for so many years, like ever since I was a child. And I was even part of a choir at some point. So music is, I know, like for most people, they know music is quite a big part of us as African people. It's a big part of like our culture. It's also a big part of how like traditions have been passed down from generation to generation, like as African people. So it was a huge part of my life since I was a kid. And then I stopped doing music or even singing at some point because I had bad experiences in the musical space where I was trying to kind of like pursue it more as a career. And then I decided, oh no, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I totally cut off that part about my life, and I focused on my entrepreneurial pursuits and all of that. And that's the direction I was taking with my life and my studies. And then years later, when I met them, and they told me about this vision that they have about putting these two passions for environmental science and music together, I thought it was quite interesting. And I was at a point in my life where I was also going through some form of a transition, and I was excited. I said, you know what, I feel like this is maybe my chance to actually get back to doing music, but using my voice for a much bigger cause than what I was interested in doing in the past. And it was enough reason to convince me to get back into it. And I was like, I jumped on, like, I was like, okay, guys, I'm totally in. I think this is a great idea. And I feel like it's something that's innovative and creative. And not many people have actually done this specifically in this part of the world. Music is usually just used as a once-off thing for concerts and whatever, but not necessarily used continuously to try and create awareness around important issues of our time or some social issues that we're facing, which obviously environmental collapse is one of those, like with issues like climate change, and of course some conservation issues that we all know about that affect the southern part of Africa. So that was the whole idea, really, and that's how it happened, and that's how I got inspired to start working in this. When I met my co-founder and colleague in the past, and yeah, I was like, this is amazing. I think I'm definitely game, and that's how we co-founded Conservation Music Lesotho, and then started doing this work that we're doing now. Yes. So I think this was in 2017. So yes, yeah. And we started doing a bit of work, and then we decided, you know what, we're just going to have to formally register it. This is actually bigger than we thought. And we formally registered, and we did a big project. So, and the rest was history after that. So yeah.
That's so fascinating, and so like, yeah, it's so interesting, and like it's amazing to hear how like you kind of had gone on this journey of kind of like, oh, maybe this isn't going to be the career path necessarily. This isn't going to be the main idea. This is going to be, but the way that it kind of, I find those types of things like in, I guess I don't know if it's a Scottish thing or whatever it is, but there's a phrase that we all like. It seems to get thrown around a lot in Scotland that is kind of like, what's for you won't go by you, which means kind of like if something is meant to happen, what will be, it will come back around, and it will happen in your life. And I guess that's kind of the story of the music. Like you kind of thought maybe not for the career, but then it wormed its way back in. It got back round again, and kind of came in there. I guess like
a big joke on me, I guess. Like, oh, you're gonna run away. Oh yeah.
Yeah. The music, it followed you and it found you again. I guess like similarly though, I suppose that's kind of the music side. Like growing up, were you always interested in the environmental side as well, or was that something that kind of came along later?
It came along later. However, the one thing I'll say is that like ever since I was a kid, we're learning a lot about the environment. Funny enough, as much as our curriculum is still very limited in terms of environmental education, but there were some basics that we got when I was still growing up. And I was very much aware, of many different environmental issues. And then I remember in high school, post-high school, we tried to start like a club with some of my friends that was going to be focusing on issues around the environment. I don't remember, we called it some green culture club or whatever, but it's always been like a part of my journey also, but not necessarily something that I was focusing on like I am at the moment. And so when years later I met like my colleagues, it was like, oh my gosh, like all these two things that are still very important to me. And also the other thing that inspired the passion for environmental issues and like sustainable development I think for me had to do with the fact that having been in business and seeing how like the Industrial Revolution has contributed to the challenges that we're currently facing, I wanted to do something about that. And I wanted to go the sustainable route. I wanted to do things differently. I was like, yeah, as much as I'm in business, but I want a way to do it in a sustainable way. And my business partners from the past will tell you, because that's when I tried to start projects like in the renewable energy sector and all of that. But yeah, I digress now. But it really has been a part of me when I look back to some degree. And then now at a later stage, they kind of converged and I found a way to put them together. So that's how it happened, really.
Yeah. It's so interesting seeing them come together and kind of see these things. And like, it does make me want to ask more about your work in the kind of renewables field. But before I do that, what I was going to ask is like, you kind of like ended up, I suppose, almost accidentally bringing these, just by coincidence, meeting these people and kind of working together and bringing this kind of idea to life and kind of, yeah, and since then, obviously, it's grown arms and legs and gone and done so many amazing creative things with lots and lots of people. I think I said 8,000 people, around 8,000 people in the intro, was what I had read. And like, when you look back on it and the whole journey, what are some of those kind of biggest achievements for you? What are the things where you look back and you're like, I am really proud of that, or like, I'm really happy with how that project turned out? Like, what are the things that you really celebrate as kind of like, I'm really glad we did this project because this happened?
Okay. So yeah, like 8,000 people, I feel like is a number for maybe like the people we touched physically, in a sense.
Yes.
Putting metrics to it. But I feel like our work has reached way much more people than that, especially even through our online platforms. So yeah, but one of the biggest achievements for us, I think, was the very first project we did. It's one that I'm really proud of, because then that was a sign for us that the work that we're doing is quite impactful, and then there's so much potential for it. And then we found that the people who most needed were the ones that actually benefited from that project we did. So this was the very first project. We called it Our Music, Our Environment. And it was basically some form of an eco-concert where, yes, initially we had done the pre-surveys. We went out into this rural village called Malealea. This is a village where we had piloted and tested more initiatives. And since then, we've had a great relationship with them. So they've been more like, our piloting ground. And it's been such a great journey that we've had with them. So we did an eco-concert. It was called Our Music Environment. We went out into the village. We interviewed about 200 villagers because it wasn't a big village. And we just identified what they know about different environmental issues and what conservation issues they probably have in their community. And then from all of that data we collected, we analyzed, like I said, when I was trying to describe our process to you earlier. So we analyzed the data to say, okay, where are the gaps? And then after identifying those knowledge gaps, then we decided that we're going to create an eco-concert that was going to address those types of issues. And after that, then we did a post or exit survey. Like after we performed about 10 songs were actually produced or created, addressing different environmental issues that were place-based and relevant to that particular community. And we did exit surveys after every song to kind of see what people have learned and if what we're doing was really effective. And we got great feedback from people, and it turned out like people learned a lot from that. And then also they identified about 56 solutions that they felt like they could use to address some of those issues in their community. So it was quite a great project, and one of the great ones that we had and that I'm very proud of. And another big thing was the fact that we were funded by National Geographic to actually do that particular project. Yeah, we were sponsored by National Net Geo for us to kind of like test like how music can be a powerful educational tool. And yeah, so it went well, yes. And it's one of my proudest projects that we've been involved in.
I mean, I can see why that sounds like, it sounds fascinating, and especially with kind of the like, I think they like the people involved identified the solutions kind of thing, like the 56 solutions or whatever. Like, it's so encouraging. I feel like having done like environmental education stuff and worked with different communities and kids and adults, it's like when you have a project that like you're proud of and you make it and like it's about to happen and like you get excited with all the prep, but when you hand it over and then see it's embraced and it has that success without necessarily you having to push it all, like they come up with the ideas and like it must be so special. That's fantastic, really, really fantastic. Yeah. And so interesting to hear about the kind of Nat Geo aspect as well, because that obviously they must recognize that it was quite an interesting and amazing thing that you were doing as well. That's so fascinating and so fantastic. And like, yeah, I guess like building on from that, like that seems like a huge, for your first project, it seems like, oh, you've set the bar high. Like after that, like after that, like what was your kind of like thought? Like, were you kind of like, oh, like how do we top this, or did you just want to keep going with kind of similar ideas? And like, what was the thought process once it was done?
For us, it was really about how do we continue? How do we spread this? How do we scale this? And it wasn't really about, oh, we've done this amazing big project for starters, so we should really so we should, we were very realistic with our expectations, but we were excited about the opportunities that we felt like it was presenting for us, and it kind of proved that this can work actually. And for us, that was the exciting element. And then we just decided we're gonna hit the ground running. We're just gonna go for it. And then the other projects that we did afterwards we're still centered around like environmental education, but addressing different issues. We did like a responsible heading campaign. I don't know if you know if heading is a thing in Scotland, but we had that. It's more like about grazing and rangeland management and all of that. So we did a campaign with that, and we partnered with another big partner then, which was GIZ, and then we did then a classroom resources project after that was also funded by the US Embassy. So we kind of like started moving and getting great partners along the way, and also getting our music toolkit approved by our National Curriculum Development Center here in the country from our Ministry of Education and Training, which was also another big thing for us. And we kind of went on the journey with them. So there's been a few good successes and milestones along the way that we're really proud of. But it wasn't about, oh, how do we top the first thing?
No, that's so fantastic though. That's so fantastic. Like, I guess you seem to have done so many different things. Just like, even though the base concept, like, I guess like it sounds so like, oh, like yeah, we combine music and conservation or the environmental kind of aspects, but like the ways that you've taken that in so many different creative directions and kind of the different aspects, so interesting to hear about. I guess like for you looking forward then, what are the kind of big goal, like what are, like when you look to the future, is there any kind of dreams that you have for the organization, any fun projects that you're like, yes, I want to kind of pursue this more, or I want to kind of like build on this project that we've done in the past? Like, what is it that like it really excites you about the future of the project? Because there must be so much.
Yeah, like there really are a lot of things. And of course, like with the pandemic, things kind of slowed down, and it was like, oh my gosh, because it was so unexpected, and we felt like we're being hindered in some way, because then we couldn't continue with our programming. But I have high aspirations, definitely, and big goals for the organization. I think, like I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest ones is to scale our impact and really move into Southern African countries, where we're going to be dealing with different kinds of issues. For instance, here in Lesotho, we don't necessarily have I'm very careful. I want to be careful with what I say, but we don't necessarily have like as much wildlife per se, where people can then where we can have these big conversations about conservation in that direction or in that context. However, the other African countries have like big wildlife, and there are a lot of conservation issues in those countries, and we're looking to just expand into these areas and address the different types of environmental issues that they're facing in their communities, because as we know, like Africa is so dynamic, it's not the same at all. And different types of issues in different areas. Like South Africa, for instance, is a very close neighbor, but it's so different from us in terms of like the environmental issues that they have. So for me, one of the big goals is really how we're going to, like in the next 5 years, how we're going to scale our impact. How do we move into the other Southern African countries, like the Southern African region, and then we can start building up to like maybe East, and then go into West and other parts of Africa. And another big one for us would be really to kind of collaborate with one of the biggest artists, like an artist we feel is very much concerned about the status quo at the moment, the environmental issues that like we're currently facing today as the world. And it would be great to actually collaborate with one such artist and create like a big project or campaign out of that. So it's one of the big goals that I have for the next few years. But other than that, to just continue doing the work that we're doing on the ground at the grassroots level and not stopping. So yeah, I'm also passionate a lot about our classroom resources program, because then I see how it allows us to go into these schools where maybe environmental education is lacking, also because of the shortage of resources and exposure even. So that's what I'm basically doing and focusing on. So for me, that would be really great to just like do that and focus on that. And the impact it has, especially on like the younger generation. I think for me, the most important thing is to start with the younger people, because then they are obviously the futures of any other country. And I feel like it's great to instill the right principles and give them like a good foundation at an early stage. And when they grow older, they won't depart from some of the great lessons that they've learned through the programs that we're doing. So for me, it's one of my passion projects, and one that I would still love to continue like going on into the future, because of the motive behind it, and also the impact that it can have. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. I think like everything you said there and all those ambitions, like they're so impressive, and they prompted so many more things like in my head when you were talking about kind of like the challenge, I guess, of kind of like the diversity of spaces and like kind of growing like the organization maybe beyond its kind of initial stage within Lesotho. Like if you were to kind of, like, for listeners who maybe are not particularly familiar with like size and diversity in terms of like even just moving to South Africa, I googled like because you know they do those overlaying maps where you put like a map of one country over so you get proper scale. Like for listeners who are maybe based in Europe, South Africa is about the size of like France, Germany, the Czech Republic, all kind of together. So it's a very big space. And so the diversity of people and kind of groups of people and languages and everything, like it'll be such an interesting way to see how this kind of project transfers. Even like like when people say like, oh, just to one other country, well, no, it's one of probably the biggest and most diverse countries in the world. So that, like it's so interesting, and it'll be such a challenge, but such an interesting one to kind of see as it grows and changes. And then the question, I guess, the second kind of thought thing that I was thinking was like when you talked about collaborating with a big artist or whatever it was, I have to ask, like, if I was to say right now I can get you anybody, who would it be? Like, who is your like dream in your head of like, I'd love to work with them?
It's a tough one. I have so many artists that come to mind that I'd really love to work with. But at the same time, I feel like, oh, it might sound like, oh, it's kind of cliche to say, oh, I would want to work with Beyoncé. Oh, I would want to work with whoever. But yeah, I think that's the kind of direction that I'm thinking. But of course, there are some artists that are not necessarily like big in how do I say this? They're not necessarily big in terms of like not globally known per se, but that I really really love to do like to collaborate with on a project that is mostly focused on like sensitization, creating more awareness, and even like continuous impact. So yes, yeah. We've reached out to a few big artists. I don't want to mention them now for whatever reasons, yeah. But we've reached out to some, especially based in the US. So because those are still like in the pipeline and where we're trying to build something there, I'm not gonna be name dropping just yet. But yeah, I think it would be really great to work with one of the big artists that's really focusing on environmental issues, or who would really wanna work on environmental issues and in a way that we're focusing. Yeah.
And I mean, like, if you can't get them, just get Beyonce. That seems like a reasonable goal. Not like she would.
That's a great momentum, I guess, that project, because there's like a lot of people who follow her and who really just like idolize her. And I think even for some movements that she's really supported, then they've been able to really they've been able to have a great impact, because then they were part of that. Like, for instance, the Global Citizen festivals that they've been part of, how then people who didn't necessarily care about certain issues, like I'll make an example, I had friends who were not necessarily concerned about some social issues, but because then they were like big followers of Beyonce, and because they were part of this Global Citizen initiative where then they had to rally people and their fans and followers, my friends were participating in that. And I think that's still powerful in its way, because for some people who didn't necessarily have like awareness about certain issues, then because someone they idolize or they look up to so much is challenging them, now that they're interested and now they're doing something. And I think that's how we can start like changing people's minds about certain things and start building momentum in certain areas. So yeah, that's the power of, I guess, in influential people in a sense. And for us, I think that's how we can collaborate with them to really like, and then have more people taking action, not just have that win, but also inspire them to take action. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic and so interesting. And I guess like it leaves me with so many more questions that I think we could talk about, but we are unfortunately reaching the end of our time. So I feel like what I'm going to do is maybe leave that idea and all those concepts for people to think about, and kind of who inspires them and how they can take action, all of these things. And kind of like what I want to do is I wanted to kind of shift onto kind of the questions that I've been kind of asking everybody this series, because I think it's quite interesting to get a variety of people's views on the same questions and kind of the same topics, aside from hearing about their kind of unique special projects. And so the first question that I've kind of been asking everybody this series is kind of, I wondered, if you were to look at kind of maybe the wildlife round about you, maybe the wildlife you've seen when you've been traveling in Africa or like around, like I've been asking people to pick their favorite underappreciated African species, whether it be a plant, an animal, whatever it is. What's the species that gets not enough attention that you would love to shine the spotlight onto?
Wow. There's one, and I have a reason for that. It's part of the Ibis family. I don't know if you've heard of the Ibis birds. It's a bird.
Yes, they're beautiful. They're beautiful. Yes.
But they're also very loud. So they like they're very close to where I live. I think I did a post a few months ago about them, because every other morning I'm woken up by them. And it's such a funny thing, because
they're mostly like found in the Southern African region, and I've heard that some parts of East Africa have them too. But you mostly find them here. And with us here in the Southern African region, even if you go to South Africa, in the big cities, they are there and they are loud. They have like a distinct sound that is so crazy and annoying. So they have a nest close to my house. And I think they just having them around has kind of built some form of curiosity for me. Sometimes they come into my yard and foraging for stuff in my yard. I'm like, what do they eat? What is in my yard that they're finding attractive or whatever? And seeing them up close has been quite an interesting experience, because then they are larger than I actually thought they were. Because I always just hear them and I'm like, oh my gosh, these birds are so annoying and they're so loud. They wake me up every morning. But I've grown to really appreciate them. And I feel like they are one bird species that are really underappreciated. They're not necessarily colorful. And so you won't look at them and be like, oh, such a beautiful bird. But I feel like there's something very interesting about them and how they cry and that sound they make, and how so many populations of them have kind of like moved into the inner cities, which is interesting for me. So you don't necessarily just go somewhere on the outskirts of town or the city to see them, but they are right here, like with us daily, which can also be easy to overlook them and what a marvel they are. But because then I've kind of like they've been annoying me like that, and then I've been paying attention to them, and then which led to me doing a bit of research about them and all of that. So I think that's the one species that I would shine a spotlight on. And I know that they're not necessarily endangered. So they're not part of the endangered species here, but they are sort of endemic to like the Southern African region in some parts, then in East Africa. And the other thing that I've learned is that then there are some other, what will I call them? They're part of the same family, but they look a bit different. They're still part of the Ibis bed. So for me, that would be the one species that I would like to highlight.
No, it's the perfect answer, because a species doesn't have to be endangered to be interesting and important and really quite like beautiful and fascinating. So I think it's a perfect choice, and I think it's one that like listeners, go and look up a picture if you don't know, because they come in so many like colors and shapes and sizes, and like they're beautiful birds. Can be quite spooky, but they are quite they are beautiful birds. I remember when I visited South Africa in 2017, I remember distinctly, because like I was so amazed. It was the first time I'd ever been to anywhere in that part of the world, and I remember the people I was visiting were like, so just like we were just leaving the airport, and they were like, you can't start taking pictures of these types of birds now, because we're not going to get anywhere otherwise, because they're just like they're everywhere. You'll see them like quite commonly, but I was just so in awe of these birds. I thought they were so like it was so strange to see something that I guess like here in the UK, if you saw one flying about, you'd be so confused. Like, so to see something that's so different to here is like, it was just amazing. And a shared love, I think we've discovered, because they're just fantastic.
And that distinct sound, like that distinct cry, like it's you can't ignore it. The Ibis hadida, so you can't miss that. Wow, it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, yes. Yeah. And I think there was also a funny video of a celebrity, like I think it was Pharrell. I don't know if you saw that video that went viral, where he was visiting South Africa for I don't know if it was his first trip or whatever, and he was sleeping, and then it was early in the morning, and then he kept hearing this sound of like, oh, like, what are those? And he was recording that. Everybody was like making fun of him, saying, welcome to South Africa, welcome to our world, and what our alarm clock, how we wake up usually.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely more interesting than a rooster or something that wakens people up. So that's.
Yeah.
But that's That's brilliant. I guess before we spend an hour geeking out about Ibis, I feel like I need to move on to the next question, which is, of course, the question I ask everybody is, what advice? What if someone's listened to this and are inspired by anything that you've said or anything you've talked about? Like, what advice do you have for them to get more involved in conservation? Maybe especially if they're a musician who's interested in getting more involved. Like, what would you say to them for some advice?
I think the greatest advice to most people is just start, like finding, once you've found something you're passionate about, especially in like the environmental space or in the conservation, just start, find people you can collaborate with to start doing the work that you would want to do. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like identifying, I think the first thing would be, yes, identifying that passion that you have or how you would want to influence in that particular space, and then starting. Because I think sometimes we overthink, because I myself am guilty of this. I'm a perfectionist and I tend to want things to be perfect before I could even start making any progress. And I've realized that once I start doing something and then some things start to move into place. They just start to move into place. Not that you shouldn't plan or anything, but I've just seen so much power in starting and not overthinking the process and thinking, oh, maybe I'm too small to make a big difference, or maybe, oh, I can't really start with this. How do I connect music and nature or the environment or whatever? But you would be surprised at how much correlation there is in so many other things. So I think the best thing would be just to start, find your area, and then find and identify how you can influence in that area, and just start. Don't overthink it. You'll see the stars will start to align. And I think this something that my life and Jenny has taught me really is that so many things don't necessarily go as we thought. But there's always this element of synchronicity. And then when you meet the right person at the right time for something you were always wanting to do or you're passionate about, and then things start to fall into place. And yeah, because if we overthink it, then we might not start, and then we might not start having the impact that we would want to have. So regardless of who you are, where you come from, how small or big you think you are, just do it and start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the perfect message. I feel like that's such an inspirational thing to kind of leave the podcast on. I think that's fantastic, amazing, brilliant advice for everybody. And hopefully they're all feeling very inspired to go out and do something new and exciting and different. Yeah. I guess, like, before we go, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of, if there was anything that you wanted, like a website to say where people can keep up to date with your work, or like social media, like where can people keep up to date with everything that you and your organization are doing?
Okay. So it's called www.conservationmusic.org. It's just like that, conservationmusic.org. I think when people get onto it, they will see the different types of projects that we're doing, even the different countries that we're trying to move into. And then they can find us on social media, on Instagram, which is still Conservation Music, and then on Twitter, Music for Earth. So those are the platforms that we can be found on, and then of course on LinkedIn. But yeah, with things having been the way they have been, even on Facebook, we're Conservation Music. So with the way things have been in the past 2 years, there hasn't been like a lot of activity. So we're at a point where we're now building up to put up a lot of have action on our online pages, basically. So yeah, they'll see that, but that's where they can find us.
Perfect. That's fantastic. And yes, I'll put links to all of that in the description of the episode, so people who kind of find it and kind of want to follow, learn more, keep up to date with everything, they'll be able to find everything down there. While they are down there, of course, I'm going to encourage them to check out our social media while you're going around them all anyway. We are at Pangolin Podcast on all the ones that Rex mentioned. Of course, we're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of those. And you can follow me on there. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at The Only Jack Baker on Instagram and at Only Jack Baker on Twitter. And you can subscribe to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, if you want to learn more, if you want to hear all the other kind of incredible stories this season and all the previous seasons, subscribe, rate, review, do all that fun stuff. We'd really appreciate that as well. And on that note, all that really remains for me to say is kind of a huge thank you, of course, to the listeners for staying with us and hopefully enjoying this journey that we've been on. I feel like I've learned so much, so I feel like they will have as well. So I hope you've all enjoyed it, listeners. And of course, thank you to you, Rex. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me. It's been fascinating. It's been so amazing to finally hear so much more about everything that you do. And yes, thank you for telling me that you do renewable work, because then you've just justified coming back on the podcast at some point in the future to talk about that. So thank you so much for all of that. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jack, for this lovely work that you're doing. I'm happy you had me here. So great. Looking forward to more episodes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And well, on that note, thank you once again, listeners. Thank you once again, Rex. And until next time, goodbye, everyone.